Mike Gallagher. Every day, Mike visits with Mark Davis, morning host on 660 AM The Answer in Dallas. Here's today's M&M Experience.
Do you remember when the then vice president came to the building you're in right now to be interviewed by your buddy Mike years ago?
Well, I wasn't here yet.
I thought you were. No, you couldn't have been. That's right. No. I conflated when you arrived at
I got here in 2012. I got here in 2012. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so wow. we got an interview with Dick Cheney. He was doing an event in Texas, and they said, would you like the vice president in studio? And we're like, we didn't do a lot of in-studio guests over there on Beltline Road. And we did that day, and they had a motorcade, and they pulled into the parking lot at 6400 North Beltline Road, and he showed up and came up to the studio, and we did a half hour together. And look, I got a lot of feelings about the passing of Dick Cheney today.
I do remember when you and I were in the same room with him, and that, of course, would be that little room called the Oval Office.
Correct.
On January 14th of 2009,
right.
as the gaggle of talk show hosts was called in by Bush 43 to sort of chew the fat back and forth. You, me, Neil Bortz, Levin. It was just glorious. And then at the end, we're doing pictures by the Resolute desk. Still a pinch me moment. And they said, somebody else is here who's a fan of you guys. And in walks Dick Cheney. And I've still got my picture standing between Bush and Cheney, and it'll always be a treasured thing. However, let me give you the baton back. Go ahead.
Well, we loved him until we didn't. We all loved him until he decided to hate Trump. Yep. And, you have to ask yourself, you look in the mirror and you say, do you hate people because they hate Donald Trump? And this is something that a lot of families, a lot of people have had to go through. Mm-hmm. It's true. Do you say, look, that person is now persona non grata because they don't like Donald Trump?
No, that's a hard no. Of course not. That's not the way to be. Any more than
that is the way a lot of people are, Mark.
But they shouldn't.
We loved him until we didn't. When did we stop loving Dick Cheney, Mark?
But again, that's different than what you said. I stopped loving him. I didn't start hating him. I could never hate a man who served this country so nobly and in so many ways. I could never hate a family member who even hates me because I got some.
Do you hate Liz Cheney?
We have both lost friends. We've lost relationships because we like President Trump and voted for President Trump. I will never be that dark and that bitter and sink that low in return. Never.
Absolutely.
I'll be sad, I'll be disappointed, but I will never return hate for hate. Never.
Bingo. That's important, and we got to remember that because you act surprised at this like it isn't happening. It is happening. There are people hating on Dick Cheney because he hates Donald Trump, and they're the same people who used to love the guy. Now, hate's a strong word. Maybe you're taking exception to my use of the word hate.
Sort of.
Do you have disdain? Do you have a loathing? Do you dismiss people? I'm just important. I mean, look, I'll be very honest. I'm going to be hard-pressed to say anything nice about Liz Cheney. How about you? Do you like Liz Cheney? Do you respect her?
No. Her brand is burned to me because of the role. It's kind of funny because she's a special example. If somebody just decided they don't like Trump and have decided they hate him, okay, it then becomes sort of dismissible. But when you are the Cruella de Vil of Trump hatred, and you move heaven and earth.
I'm
very proud of that. Came up with that on the fly. And you get that bogus committee and the attempt to destroy him and turn the rule of law on its ear and congressional procedure on its ear. You then enter a particularly dark category.
But it's all driven by Trump hatred.
All of it.
Everything she did was because her losing her seat because of the despicable way she manipulated that stupid committee. All the crap she pulled. I heard one of the SRN news anchors this morning when I was driving in listening to you say, and it summed it up perfectly. A commanding figure of the GOP establishment has died at the age of 84. That sums it up because it's the GOP establishment that gave rise to Trumpism. Yeah. And we have to acknowledge that. But I am so intrigued by the personal dynamic of hating somebody. Look, I've lost friends since the election of 2024. I've got people who I've known for 20 plus years won't talk to me anymore. There are, and that's not unique to me. There are people, I guarantee you, probably not even on your radar, who don't have any interest in talking to you anymore because of your support for President Trump.
Correct.
So, but I love what you said. We don't return the favor the same way. We don't reward hate with hate. No. I don't hate somebody because they hate Trump.
No.
Well, I look, there's a part of me that gets it. He's rough. He's bombastic. He's got an edgy, a somewhat obnoxious personality.
Yep.
And it's now I have to admit I've never understood the true TDS because it gets so personal for them, Mark. Mm-hmm. It gets so in there. It poisons their. I've talked about this for years. It poisons their soul. It makes smart people dumb. It makes nice people mean.
It makes funny people unfunny.
You're so right on every level, and that's what happened to Dick Cheney, and that's what happened to Liz Cheney. And, but that doesn't mean we ignore his years of great public service, his commitment to this country, his leadership post 9/11. He was a guy we admired. Sadly, there are people we admire who succumb to this bizarre malady called Trump derangement syndrome, and Vice President Cheney was one of them.
They're also, and it gets even more deliciously complex, and my text line is filled with some of this, of people who have had no use for him for a lot longer as being the neocon architect of post 9/11 Patriot Act. Because as you and I were going through 01, 02, 03, 04, 05, in relative harmony with a war on terror, who even knew what that meant, but it seemed like a logical thing to go to war against forces in the part of the world that's trying to kill us. Okay, let's see how this goes. And it ultimately didn't go so well for a really long time. But there were people who were against it from the word go. And they have wound up, I guess, historically being, I don't know if you call them right. I'll never sit here and say, I was dead wrong or you were dead wrong for being on board for this in 02, 03, 04, 05. History moves forward, things change, your perspective changes, our view of the world changes. A decade or 10 or 12 years of Operation Iraqi Freedom don't look like time and money and blood well spent in a lot of ways in the rearview mirror. But there were those who hopped on immediately, and some Democrats, some Republicans, who had no use for ramping up a war effort in that part of the world. And he was more the face of that war effort than Bush was.
Look, this country is not perfect. We've made mistakes. Weapons of mass destruction. I mean, there were mistakes made. There's no question about it. That doesn't change.
Don't get me started.
Well, it's
Don't
true.
Get me started. No, okay.
What do you mean?
All right.
Well,
WMDs.
Well,
he had a year and a half. I absolutely believe there were weapons of mass destruction.
There could have been.
And Saddam had a year and a half to get them to Syria. But let's not bog down.
But we could get bogged down. Look, we haven't been perfect on everything, but that doesn't mean that. And I also don't think it's a good time. Whatever you think, if Nancy Pelosi, who to me is one of the most wretched political figures in history, if she dropped dead tomorrow, no one should jump up and down on her grave. No one should jump up and down on Dick Cheney's grave. These are people who are loved by people who love them. And I just want to have a little bit of empathy today that this Dick Cheney, whatever you think of him, a father, a husband, grandfather. And again, a man we admired.
Download the podcast and hear all of Mike and Mark's conversations at MikeOnline.com for the M&M experience.
That'll do it for an election day. Go do your part. Don't be on the sidelines. Be engaged. Vote, vote, vote. Let's hope that we're celebrating tomorrow, but we will see. Have a great day. Be safe. Keep fighting the good fight. I'm Mike Gallagher. God bless America.